Let's take a look at an attribute MSA. I think you'll find that it's very similar to a gauge R&R study, but instead of continuous data, we have discrete data. Discrete is also known as attribute or categorical data because you would be counting things that have certain attributes or counting things that fall into certain categories. In this case, to get your data collection template and set up your experiment, you go to Sigma Excel, we'll go to the Measurement System Analysis section, Basic Templates, and select Attribute MSA. What comes up is a template that will now accept 30 parts. Remember that discrete or attribute data requires larger sample sizes than continuous data. Whereas a gauge R&R study recommended 10 parts, an attribute MSA needs 20 to 30 parts. As you collect the items for people to inspect, roughly half of them should be good and roughly half of them should be defective. You'll notice on the left it says, how are you going to designate a good and a bad part? In our study, let's put good parts as G for good, and bad parts we'll put as NG for no good. On the left, where it asks you for the true standard, that is the known correct answer for the items we're going to have people inspect. In our case, let's say that your study focuses on correct forms coming in from patients. The form that is submitted could either be perfect or it could be defective in some way. So you're going to go gather, let's say, 20 forms. Half of them should be perfect, half of them should be defective in some way. And we're going to see if your data collection team can tell the good ones from the bad ones. That's the bottom line purpose of an attribute MSA. So we would take this, and on the left, we would fill in the known correct answer for the good ones and bad ones. That might look something like this. Then, much like a gauge R&R study, you would take up to 3 appraisers, and each appraiser could inspect each of these 20 forms twice. That's important to get the repeatability aspect of this, or what will be called within appraiser agreement. Like a gauge R&R study, you would bring your appraisers up one at a time and have them inspect each of the 20 forms in random sequence. As they tell you their answer, kind of pass, fail, or good or no good in this case, you would record that in the data collection worksheet. Appraiser A would come up, we would get their 20 measures, and they go off and have a soda. Appraiser B comes up, we get their 20 measures, off they go to do some email. Appraiser C comes up, gives their 20 measures, and off they go to lunch. Back comes appraiser A, we have them do their second 20, etc. By the time we're done, we will have a sheet that looks like this. It will be totally filled in with the goods and the no goods. Like a gauge R&R template, if you scroll down from this, you will find that it automatically calculates the MSA statistics for us. As opposed to a gauge R&R, the vocabulary is a little different. What you called repeatability in gauge R&R is called within appraiser agreement here. And you can clearly see the percentage of within appraiser agreement. The cutoff values are not necessarily universal. Different authors will have different cutoff values. The ones presented to you in our material were as follows. Greater than or equal to 90% gave you a green light. Less than 70% constitutes a red light. And between 70 to less than 90% is a yellow light. In this case, this is very interesting. When it comes to within appraiser agreement, we get a green light for appraiser C, we get a yellow light for appraiser A, and poor appraiser B is left with a red light with their 60% agreement. When we start looking at appraiser versus standard, this is the extent to which your data collection team has given you the correct answer for the forms they inspected. Again, we see a green light for appraiser C, a yellow light for A, and a red light for appraiser B. already a pattern is emerging. We need to go back and see what's going on with appraiser B, and appraiser A also needs a little bit of coaching. Something's going wrong somewhere. Between appraiser agreement takes a look at what was called reproducibility in gauge R&R. To what extent did everyone give you the same answers for these forms? You'll see we've got 50%, which is a red light for between appraiser agreement. And where each appraiser versus standard gave you an individual report card on each appraiser, all appraiser versus standard gives you a score for your whole data collection team. So unfortunately, we get a red light on between appraiser agreement and all appraiser versus standard. This means we're going to have to go back up to the session window and take a look at the actual data and see if we can find any patterns. There's one thing that will help us on the right-hand side of the screen where you see within appraiser error. If we scroll down, you'll notice that this gives us a count, and it says that appraiser B has 8 out of the 20 where they gave you different answers each time they inspected something. So that's a good place to start. And as we look at the pattern inside appraiser B, one of the things we find is they're pretty good at identifying defective forms. If the true answer is NG, they're fairly consistent in telling us that it's NG. The main problem with appraiser B is if you give them a good form, they will very often identify that as a defective form. So we might start our corrections with going to appraiser B, coaching them again on what good forms versus bad forms look like, trying to debug this, and then again quickly rerun the experiment and see if we can't get a green light. So just like with gauge R&R, once you find the patterns inside this, you make some corrections, quickly rerun the study, and hopefully you will get some numbers that give you green lights. From there, you know you can trust the data that your team brings back for your project. Great tool, very similar to the gauge R&R study, but also has its own subtleties and differences based on the type of data that you are using. Good luck in doing your own Attribute MSA.